What's up, crypto junkies? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Roubini. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You guys know me, I'm really bad with names. But I think for the most part this guy is completely and utterly full of shit. And we're going to talk about that today in this video. Here's what we got going on to catch you up, okay? Let's just backtrack here for a second. Who is this guy? He's got, look at it, you Google search him. He's got the thing going on over here. He's got a Wikipedia page. Okay, he's a big deal. I don't know how you couldn't know, but actually he's referenced as Dr. Doom. It's because he claims that Bitcoin represents the mother of all bubbles. Here's what I really don't like. We're just gonna set the tone about a few things and we're gonna bridge and connect, hopefully, some dots for you in your brain today. But psychological projection, which is where there's a party or a person and they're doing this thing. And then they talk about how other people are doing the same thing that they're actually themselves doing. Psychological projection. It's annoying. It's really, really annoying. I'll just go ahead and highlight this here, this fact right here. We have the J question coming up into this again, which I won't actually say that because there's a high chance that it'll get this get a strike against this channel. So you should probably research that rabbit hole for yourself, but just check here on YouTube and you'll see what I'm talking about. So anyways, this guy is an American economist and he's got all this credentials. People think he's really, really smart, so they listen to him. What we got going on is that he has written testimony that he submitted for hearing on cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology for the US Senate Banking Committee. Why did they go to this guy? And if they went to this guy, who else did they go to? And I don't have that information at this point, but we're gonna go through his testimony. And we're gonna go through the Twitter that follows and ensues. Crypto is the mother of all scams, now busted, bubbles, while blockchain is the most overhyped technology ever, no better than a spreadsheet database. This is how he starts this off, okay? I will say that I think he brings up some really valid points, and I think he brings up a ton of just garbage, to be fair. And this is where I think people's discernment needs discernment nowadays. There's something great that you can learn from just about everybody, just about everything. In a system, there's a deep structure to everything. And a lot of times you are learning what to do and what not to do based on how the application of this thing or person is going on and going through the world, right? So I think that is widely missed, and a lot of people, they box themselves, and this is still the duplicating pattern over and over again of identifying with I'm a this, I'm a that, because it forces you to agree with and say yes to things that you might not necessarily believe, but you're doing because it's part of the party or it's part of the category or group. He's a professor of economics of Stern School of Business, New York University. He claims to be an expert of global economy, international financial markets, asset and credit bubbles and their bust, and related financial crisis. He was one of the few economists warning about and predicting in advance the global crisis economy of 2007 to 2009. I'd be interested to see where he fit into the actual real storyline, and if he just kind of rode on the shirt tails of other people who did expose this, and actually, okay, time out. Let me just go ahead and, who's the guy? We're looking for the guy who Christian Bale played. Who did he play? Michael Burry. There we go. Okay, so what I'd be interested to see is, did Roubini, how did he fit into the talk, in the conversation? Because I know how this guy did. I know how Michael Burry did. I saw the movie and then I kind of went nuts into researching it. In 2005, this guy actually started to get housing indexes and different housing high-risk loans created by the banks because they all thought he was retarded and stupid, and so they loved their odds and they loved their chances of winning up against this one single guy. So if Roubini saw this, then where was he in the equation? Because this guy actually got them to make. He proposes to create credit default swaps. He helped create a lot of new markets that now exist. It was due to these markets and these new investment vehicles. Okay, so I want to see where Roubini fits into this equation, because Michael Burry actually went out and got new credit vehicles created, and that's how much he believed in his bet. So he went and did it and bet against what he knew to be true deep down. So this is the problem. You have hindsight people who come in and say, yeah, I predicted it. And you got to go back and look at what they were actually saying. Because if they're just saying, oh, we're in dire straits and this is a really bad situation and da-da-da-da-da, or were they saying specifically much deeper structure of what's going on? And how deep they were talking about the situation tells you a little bit better about how much they had a grasp on the current situation. Because Michael Burry was willing to go all in on this. and he went all in with all of his money into this one thing. I didn't see Roubini, and I haven't heard anything about him doing the same. So it doesn't mean that he's wrong. It doesn't mean that he's full of shit. But to compare the two, it's like we have a guy who said, oh, I predicted this, but he didn't go all in on anything. And that's okay, but we had a guy who also predicted it, who did go all in. So comparing the level of truth, I guess, and that's part of your discernment, okay? So there's the breadcrumb. I wanted to go through some of this with you because he's making a lot of really wild accusations against Bitcoin. That it's a Ponzi scheme and that there's nothing behind it. Let's start with that. Okay, gosh, where do we even begin with this? Sometimes I actually forget that this is still like a topic to be talked about. This isn't, I'm not being rude in any sort of way. It's just when you've been in crypto for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, for 6 years, you realize the truth behind other currencies and other monies, then Bitcoin doesn't stand out, okay? So the argument, and this is what I don't like about people like Roubini, his argument, one of his arguments is that there's nothing back behind Bitcoin. That's why it's a Ponzi. So the most logical first question, what is behind the US dollar right now? Go ahead, Google search that one out. Take a minute, take your time. I'll answer it for you. This, jack, there's zero, there's all behind it. One could argue we're actually in a worse situation now than in 2007 to 2009. I haven't researched Roubini enough to know if he's talking about this dire economic situation we're in now, because we are in it globally. Over $247 trillion in global debt. 24 to 25 trillion sits on the books right now in the US. We have the President of the United States openly talking about his concern of how much money and how freely the Fed is just printing money. So those are very obvious indicators. I could very easily posture myself right now as an expert who then 2 years from now, when the bottom hits and the panic is in full effect, I could say, I told you so. Why though? Why? For a little ego pump, a little endorphin kick in my brain? I don't like that at all. One of his big arguments is that it's a bubble and it's a Ponzi, and that the bubble's already popped, and that it's a Ponzi because there's nothing behind it. Okay, so then the US dollar's a Ponzi. How many other fiats? There's over 157 fiats right now, I think, yeah? I'll fix the data point and I'll put it on the screen. 157 fiat currencies right now. How many of them are Ponzis? Okay, so this we would call hypocrisy and integrity. It's okay for you to do it, the US government to do it, well, it's not the US government, it's the Federal Reserve, which is not the US government. So it's okay for the Federal Reserve to do it, and they don't get the same level of scrutiny from somebody like Roubini, who's this quote-unquote economist, but Bitcoin is a Ponzi. And I'll agree with you, like, there's an argument to be made that Bitcoin is a Ponzi. In the same breath, it's only because everything else could be framed as a Ponzi as well. Like literally everything could be framed as a Ponzi, could be framed as a pyramid. From corporate structures to how IPOs are run, to how the Federal Reserve works, to how centralized banking works. It's all assets. They're not even assets. We're off to a really bad start. Why would I listen to you if you already are showing such clear bias towards something that you fundamentally don't understand, but you're like getting in on it for cheap talking points? All right. Now to show the other side of it, and something that I agree with, is what he says about ETH. This is from his Twitter. So 3 hours ago from me shooting this, he responds with, ETH was marketed as a decentralized and trustless when it was the opposite. And even today, it remains a non-compliant security, as current and former regulators and legal scholars have shown and argued. I agree with this. So see, that's where I can set aside my own, like, desire to be right and just agree with somebody, because that's the truth in this situation. ETH is not decentralized, it's centralized. If Vitalik were to die today, the price of ETH would be affected. That is not decentralization at all, okay? So it has a CEO, it has somebody behind it, and every time he opens his mouth, it affects the price, not as much as, say, Tron, but it does have weight. Now, something that he fundamentally doesn't understand is how proof of stake and how proof of work concept is. And so here is psychological projection, once again, biting him in the ass. So what he says is, talk is cheap. After 5 years of waiting for POS, proof of stake, to solve the impossible trinity and failing to do so, now you are peddling the even weirder vaporware of sharding, always selling the future vaporware dream, while crypto land is massively centralized and not secure and not scalable. The thing that I'd say is completely full of in this statement is that always selling the future vaporware dream. Everyone's doing this, bro. Like, shut the up. Every CEO does this. Every IPO has to do this. You have to sell the future. The president is selling the future. This is part of the game. You can't frame a little truth around a bunch of crap. Now, the thing that's correct, I would say, in this statement is that it is massively centralized. Bitcoin, I'm sorry, is massively centralized right now, and it's not secure enough, and there is scalability issues. These are all things that have been admitted by Bitcoin maximalists. That's not me being against Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. Okay, I'll bleed for Bitcoin, but it is centralized. It's massively centralized. It's centralized in its mining. It's centralized from an exchange standpoint. It's centralized with the wallets holding it. That's not decentralization, okay? When the few hold the many, that is called centralization. Also, too, there are security issues. There's just a big patch that they pushed out. Luckily, they caught it early on before it affected anything, but it could have completely taken down Bitcoin. It was not talked about because it was prevented and it didn't happen. But if it wouldn't have been and it would have happened, we'd have a completely different set of circumstances in front of us. So there are security issues and security concerns. There's also scalability concerns, which is why the sharding and Lightning Network and all these other new things are getting developed, okay? So it's not a perfect thing, and I'm willing to admit that. I still love it, but I'm willing to admit that. Now, I haven't actually read through this. Let me kind of pause and read through what he's actually talking about here. First couple of paragraphs are basically talking about how a bunch of retail money got into the market through Thanksgiving and Christmas of 2017 and got taken to the cleaners. This is absolutely true. But this happens every single day in the stock market. Where's your bleeding heart for them? 99% of people still lose in the stock market and it's over 200 years old. Where's your bleeding heart been for them? But you're so ready to get on stage and talk about how Bitcoin's a scam. So you're a hypocrite. You're a massive hypocrite because this is just serving your agenda. So whether this is getting you airtime or whether this is getting you more books sold or whatever it is, getting you on more stages, this is a personal agenda that you have that you're using Bitcoin to serve. If it was really that you have a bleeding heart for people getting over, retail money getting over, then you would be out there in the trenches fighting the stock market every single day. And you would be fighting whales and the order spoofing and front running and all the problems that still exist to this day in the stock market, even though they're much smaller. You'd be out there fighting those as much as you're out here trying to fight cryptocurrency. But that's not the case, is it? So here we are. Then just argues that calling Bitcoin has lost 70% of its value, and on average, altcoins have lost 95%, calling them vaporware and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now that the crypto scammers have run their course on Bitcoin and all the existing coins, now they've somehow pivoted to blockchain. But here's, again, where this argument falls thin, is you could search right now, let's do it, okay? We could search blockchain patents and see when a lot of these blockchain patents went through, because a lot of them have gone through in the last 12 months, but they've been researched over the last 14 months, 18 months, 2 years. There's been ongoing research by banks, governments, institutions about how blockchain technology can be useful. And now they're going out and getting the patents. So if we look at the timeline, the simple bell curve of development goes what? Research, then patents, then execution and rollout. And that's what we see happening. So your argument falls pretty thin, once again, that blockchain is now like been pivoted since January or something, as if there wasn't already a ton of research and development going on before November of 2017. That's just not true. And you can backtest this really quick in a Google search, which I did a fairly job doing that. You can take your time and do it yourself, okay? Okay, just reiterating his point with how the value of the coins has dropped tremendously over, well, since essentially the bubble, okay? So when the bubble burst. The thing I'll say here is that he's talking about how it's the bubbles burst and that now the fallout is officially here. What this actually means is that if there's any other bubble that occurs, which I think that the bubble that happened in Bitcoin and crypto in November and December of 2017, I think that was actually a small one in comparison to a much bigger thing that will occur. So he's ignoring a lot of market cycles. He's ignoring a lot of Wyckoff. He's ignoring the Wall Street cheat sheet. He's ignoring a lot of historical data and just thinking that now this is the bottom. One could argue though too that going from an asset that launched with no marketing and no team and no CEO to now 9 years later be sitting at $6,000, $6,500 value as Bitcoin is, it's kind of impressive still, right? Now there's a ton of people that went to the cleaners. There's a ton of people that went to the cleaners on how many IPOs now? GoPro is down in the dumps. Tesla is down in the dumps. How many other IPOs have now lost people money? So again, where's your bleeding heart for them? Where's your comparison? Where's your cross argument that it's a much bigger problem that systemically is an economic issue that needs to be looked at? And you could make an argument for that, and I would listen to that, and I would rally behind that, because I do think there is a problem. But you're not. You're just all crypto, all Bitcoin. And you're taking a very derogatory approach towards the currencies themselves. So this is actually 37 pages. How much should we go through? With edits, we're well over 15 minutes right now. So let's cover this, and then I'll wrap up. I'll link to all this underneath the video. Obviously, do your own research. I would love for your interaction and just your thoughts on this in the comment section with what you're thinking on this. Do you see what I'm talking about? Do you see what I've broken down through this video? I'd love to hear that, to make sure that I've done a clear job. To be a currency, Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency should be a serviceable unit of account, means of payment, and a stable store of value. The only thing I'd say does not exist here is there's this mass delusion that something needs to be stable to be a store of value. That's not true at all. It's still a store of value. It's just a volatile store of value. It is none of those things. No one prices anything in Bitcoin. Few retailers accept it. So grazing over some details, there's a lot of retailers that accept it. There's another 20 or 30,000 in Germany that was just announced yesterday on Cointelegraph that are looking to accept virtual currencies. Bitcoin Cash has a ton of integration in mainstream and acceptance. This is once again a centralized guy trying to wrap his head around and his logic around something that should be decentralized, even though it's not right now. It is a hopeful decentralization solution versus what we have now. So this guy likes what we have now. You can tell that, right? Knowing that he has that bias, why would I listen to him? No one prices anything in Bitcoin. That statement doesn't really make sense. So somebody like the Federal Reserve should be manipulating and constantly pegging and anchoring and talking about what the price of Bitcoin should be from day to day. That would be a better system. That's what we have now. The legacy system, the fiat currency in the United States, has lasted 48 years, longer than any other fiat currency next to the British pound, which has lost a tremendous amount of value. Cue the stats on the screen. I've posted this on my Twitter as well many, many times. This is becoming more and more wide known information. I think you guys should absolutely know it. But fiat is the joke here, and the system that fiat represents is the joke. And this guy seems to be, Roubini seems to be really into that. And it's a poor store of value because its price can fluctuate by 20 to 30% in a single day. I wouldn't say that that's a poor store of value. It's a poor currency used as a daily currency, used as a transacting currency to buy your groceries. It makes it absolutely a poor use case for that. Yes, I'll agree with that. And since its price has been so unstable and volatile, almost no merchant will ever use it as a means of payment. This is, again, who's making this? Where's this data coming from? Almost no merchant. When you say something like almost always, it installs this thought process that means always. Almost no merchants will ever use. This is literally the same thing. He could have said almost all, or what he said is almost ever, will ever. Okay, so almost no merchant will ever use. That's like saying all of them. Just say all of them. But then where's that data coming from? So just like he got fancy up here and he's got his references and he's got his references up here, where's your reference here? Where's your reference in any of this? So this is all opinion. So do you see how throughout this piece he's used fact and truth and then wrapped his opinion in it? This is the problem with psychological projection. And we all do this because we all live in a slightly different delusion. And so once again, this guy is doing this, but to pass his agenda, which is that Bitcoin is and cryptocurrency is. I think you're getting my point. I would encourage you guys to go through this entire document and really understand what's being talked about here and understand the deep psychological pieces and triggers that are at play, because this is a guy who's now got access to the US Senate, got access to the banking committee, which who knows if he's, what I'd look at is, has he been lobbied? Has he taken money from any of the world banks and monetary fund? Look at this, Bank of Israel. So he's already got connections with these guys, but yet he's gonna show up and talk badly about them? Of course he won't, you know? So it's like, where's the lobbying money coming from? These are the basic things that you got to look at with somebody. Like, where's their bias? What do they have to gain or lose by talking this way about this thing? Anyway, that's all I've got for this video. I'll give all the links underneath this on Roubini and this Senate hearing testimonial that he's got essentially going. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did I paint a clear picture for you? Do you understand where I'm coming from? Did it make sense how I pieced this together? Let me know in the comments section. And also too, I'd love to hear what you think about this whole thing. Do you agree with Roubini? Do you disagree with him? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and create a dialogue in the comments section below. If this is your first time to the channel, take a second, go ahead and click the subscribe button, hit the bell notification. You'll get a lot more of our notifications that way, not all of them. And be on the lookout because we will be dropping more content on the channel very soon, my friends. See ya.